Good afternoon. My name is Polly Escovedo, and I'm the Program Manager and the Acting Executive Officer for the California Cultural and Historical Endowment. It's our pleasure today to walk you through the draft guidelines for the new museum program, and we'll include the next steps as well as a timeline. We're going to be accepting public comments through April the 15th. The CCHE is a state entity that was established in 2002, and it was originally established under the state library. This program has awarded over $122 million in 180 projects, which is no small feat. In 2013, Governor Brown signed AB 482, which transferred the endowment under the California Natural Resources Agency. The bill also authorized a new museum program, which is what brings us here today. Before we delve into the guidelines, note that the bill also authorized the endowment to sponsor a new special interest license plate using the image of Snoopy. And this is being done in partnership with the California Association of Museums. And it's with the generous permission of Gene Schultz, as well as Peanuts Worldwide, that's made this possible. To date, we've had nearly 5,200 pre-orders for the license plate. We're closing in on our target of 7,500. This is that magic number that DMV needs before they'll start the production process. So if you've not ordered your plate, we're going to say good grief and hope that you do so soon. Keep in mind that the revenues from the license plate are what will continually fund this program beyond the first 2 years. The initial funding remains Proposition 40, and we're going to call that Phase 1. This is going to be done in 2 phases. Phase 1 will have 2 cycles. We have about 3.4, we have a little bit more than that actually. I think we're closer to $4 million, and we'll do the awards in 2 cycles, just under $2 million each. I think with that, we'll turn it over to Lori Heller.
Hello. I'm going to talk to you, to start with, about the goals of the legislature. They acknowledged, as they put this program in place, that museums do important work in the community and that they contribute to education on every level, including as a significant resource for teachers, that museums are important means of making art and science and history and culture available to Californians, and museums provide an economic boost in the communities and often help identify the public communities, identify themselves as a foundation of their cultural identity. So in putting this in place, they recognize the value of museums in the communities. And so they set in place a program whose goal is to assist and enhance the services of California's museums and other groups and institutions which undertake cultural projects deeply rooted in and reflective of previously underserved communities. These projects are intended to help preserve tangible aspects of California's history, artifacts, collections, archives, historic structures, and property. And this has been the long-term goal of CCHE from the beginning. The museum itself is identified in the legislature. To apply must be a public agency, a private nonprofit institution, or a federally recognized tribe that is organized on a permanent basis for essentially educational or aesthetic purposes, that owns or uses tangible objects, cares for those objects, and exhibits them to the public on a regular basis. So that is the primary eligibility criteria for who may apply for this program. That is how the organization that applies must identify themselves, and they must be one of these 3, either public agency, private nonprofit, or federally recognized Indian tribe. We took a look at the survey that the California Association of Museums did a few years ago. They identified over 1,300 museums in the state of California, and these museums are as diverse as the communities. They range in size, location, discipline. They're in rural areas, they're in underserved areas throughout the state. And this is the broadest definition of museum that we could come up with that is appropriate to the field, which includes art museums, children's museums, general museums or specific museums, history and heritage, which includes historical societies and cultural centers, living collections, such as aquariums, botanical gardens, and zoological parks, natural history museums, including anthropology and nature centers, science and technology museums, tribal museums. Most kinds of museums that exist are eligible for this program. Some museums that are located within a parent organization may need to identify whether or not they are eligible to apply. So the museum itself must meet one of the criteria, be a nonprofit, a public agency, or a tribe. If they aren't, then it's their parent organization that needs to apply. So as you go forward into this application process, you might identify that in advance. CAM did that museum survey. They identified some attributes about museums in the state of California that we used as we were putting together this program. We looked at, for instance, that about 90% of museums are in the public interest, either private nonprofit or 20% governmental entities. Most of the revenue sources at our institutions come from private sources, with only 15% coming from the government. Expenditures, as you can imagine, focus primarily on general operations. And it was interesting to us to note that almost all museums conduct a variety of activities, including half of them conducting educational activities at their facility. Most have permanent collections, and most exhibit these collections on a regular basis. All of these relate to space needs and improvements that museums might do, which is why we were interested in them. More than 2/3 hold temporary exhibits each year. Museum facilities range in size, interior space all the way up to 3.5 million square feet, and exteriors as well, up to 52 million. So some are very large in parks, and others are quite small. Most museums have additional venues, meaning cafes and restaurants, meeting rooms, classrooms, and rental facilities, all which help bring in money. 1/3 of museums are engaged in a capital campaign. This was 2006, at the time that this museum survey took place. And over 60% of museums are responsible for their own building operations. Others have some kind of agreement, maybe with a parent organization or another entity. And 1/3 of museums at the time of the survey ran an involuntary budget deficit, which we took into consideration also as we put together these guidelines. Our recommendation is that grant requests be between $50,000 and $250,000. Only one application being submitted per applicant each cycle, and matching funds are required as evidence of commitment to the project and as evidence of community support. The match must be 1-to-1. That is, for every dollar of grant, the grantee must provide $1 of match. In the match, up to half of that must be cash, and half of it may be in kind. Okay? Matching funds, of course, are intended to leverage resources and to bring the museum applying a diversity of resources, and we expect that applicants will seek their cash match from other state, local, federal funding sources, as well as private corporations, foundations, and local businesses. We are also recommending that at the discretion of the state, for small nonprofit museums with annual budgets under $500,000, that's how we're defining small, a lower than usual match may be requested if necessary to make the project realistic for underserved communities. And this is permitted by legislation. Couple of restrictions on the match. Applicants may not use a loan or line of credit to fulfill their match. Some applicants or some grantees do use lines of credit to help with cash flow later on, but this may not be turned into a construction loan because, as you can see, all properties developed or acquired with these funds are to be free and clear from encumbrances. Match resources should be available at the time of the grant. However, they cannot be expended until after the project performance period begins, which is when the grant agreement is put in place. There is one exception to that. If the architectural plans and drawings were developed for this specific project within the past year, they may be considered part of the cash match. Other categories of in-kinds include labor. I didn't know that this was going to bounce around. That's kind of cute. Labor, materials and supplies, planning costs, real property or long-term lease, and permanent fixtures. However, to qualify as a match, it must be one of the things that you could bill us for, an eligible cost under the guidelines. So what kinds of projects can you apply for? This is a competitive grant program intended to support small capital asset projects in museums. As defined by the legislation and other California code, capital asset means tangible physical property with an expected useful life of 15 years or more. So that would include major repairs, reconstruction and retrofitting work, anything of this nature that continues or enhances the useful life of the capital asset. Capital assets may be acquisitions of real property, that is land, buildings, and easements, or it may be development of real property, and development would include the improvements, rehabilitations, restorations, preservations that we talked about previously. So here's some examples. In the survey that the endowment did a few years ago, they identified specific needs of the museum community in California, and many of these, if not most, are eligible under this program. So energy efficient improvements, for instance, new lighting fixtures or plumbing that saves water or energy, restoring aging facilities or retrofitting them for accessibility, expanding space for collection or for storage or for exhibitions, exterior renovations to the ground to conserve water and energy, and major repair projects such as new roofs, flooring, or windows, all of which will last a minimum of 15 years. We gave in the guidelines a bunch of examples of the kinds of projects. In addition to the ones that we've talked about, construction, acquisition, expansion, improvements, for collections, for exhibition space. We also will fund the installation of permanent exhibits. We will do facility upgrades, as we talked about, replacement or major repairs, safety retrofits, and seismic or ADA. These are some of the things that we don't pay for with this program. It doesn't pay for any programming activities. It doesn't pay for collections, acquisition, or restoration. It doesn't pay for publications or research or social media or outreach or events. It doesn't pay for equipment, generally because that will not last 15 years or more. It doesn't pay for the day-to-day maintenance of the facility, audiovisual equipment, lobbying efforts, out-of-state travel. Projects with religious or sectarian purposes are not eligible. And the state requires that all historic structures have certain rigorous rules when they're being constructed or developed, so that would need to be adhered to. While we're talking about eligible projects, these are some of the costs which would be eligible. All costs must be directly related to the project. So we do not pay administrative costs or overhead such as, telephone, space rental, and ongoing maintenance. Administrative costs that are directly related and supported by documentation can be paid for by this program. We cap all non-construction costs at 25%, so we will pay for planning, engineering, construction management, environmental impact reports, and things of that nature, but only up to 25%. And we will pay for the costs of acquiring property, including appraisals, preliminary reports, escrow fees, etc. The property, once it's developed or acquired, has certain restrictions. For acquisitions with these funds, the property must remain for this use in perpetuity. For development projects, the grantee must maintain and operate the project for no less than 15 years. The grantee may enter an agreement with another entity to operate and maintain the project. That's perfectly fine. But we do want you to know that a deed restriction will be registered against the property once the state has invested in the project. Another thing that the legislature did when they were designing this program is they identified some priorities or objectives that they are seeking museums to do. One, of course, is to produce superior programs and cultural services. The other is to provide services to school pupils in a wide variety of ways. Another is to increase access to museum services and collections. And thirdly, in general, to increase services to the public. And this might include reaching out to a historically underserved population, diversifying or expanding your audience, or helping you to raise professional standards. Now, although this is identified by the legislature, this program does not pay for any of these directly. So we are asking you to make sure that your capital asset project serves one of these purposes. And the guidelines are designed so that you can tell us about how your capital asset project is going to be, especially addressing one of these needs that has been prioritized by the legislature. The other thing that we are proposing, consistent to the goals to assist and enhance previously underserved communities, additional 5 points for museums which serve primarily underserved communities. And by underserved, we are defining it as primarily as 50% and as underserved with median household incomes under $36,000 annually. And we have a flyer in the back if you want to pick it up that gives you more information on this program, on this aspect of the program. So the estimated timeline is that here we are in the public comment period, and we expect that these guidelines will be finalized after you make your public comments. They will go for final approval in May and be released for solicitation in June, during which time we will conduct technical assistance workshops. The applications are anticipated to be due in September, and after that there will be a peer review. Site visits will be conducted early next year, and final recommendations to the board approximately next May. So a year usually is about right for running one of these programs. This is just a little history on what we've been doing to date in order to develop these guidelines. Of course, we had to combine the ongoing CCHE guidelines that have been in existence for a decade with the guidelines for the programs that we manage here at the Resources Agency. We had to take into account legal requirements and legislative requirements. We had a working group review the early drafts and give us some guidance and recommendations early on. We also looked at other museum programs that are conducted around the nation for models, and we went to the American Association of Museums for Characteristics of Excellence. Remember that superior museums goal. And then we also looked at other capital projects that are cities that are funding capital projects in their communities. All of these went into these guidelines that you have in front of you. The solicitation period, this is just a little bit about when it's time to apply. And I have a little puzzle piece up there for a reason, because it's kind of a puzzle to put together one of these grant applications. As I said before, we'll have approximately a 90-day solicitation period, conducting at least 4 technical assistance workshops, and the staff at Resources Agency is very available by phone for questions or to help guide you if you have any questions about your application or eligibility requirements. But in general, this is a little checklist that we put in the guidelines so that you know all of the things that you need to attach to your application. In general, there's 5 parts: the actual application form itself, an executive summary, the proposal narrative, which of course is the primary bulk of your application, and forms and attachments that support your museum's capacity, and other supporting documents to help support your need and the project that you're proposing. As I said before, we anticipate September for applications to be due. Once we receive your application, they're reviewed for eligibility by staff, and then the proposals are evaluated by peer reviewers. These peer reviewers will actually meet to select a number of these for site visits, and a team from the agency will conduct the site visits, and then the peer reviewers will come back again to make their list of recommendations. The agency will submit this list to the CCHE board, and the CCHE board will make the final award of grants. Now, Craig is going to talk about what happens after you get a grant.
Okay, thank you, Lori. My name is Craig Zeff. I'm a grants administrator for the Natural Resources Agency. And as Lori mentioned, I'm going to talk to you about grants administration. Okay, so you've gone through the selection process. You've made it. Congratulations. You now have an award for either a development project or an acquisition project. In the case of a development project, you'll be assigned a grants administrator, and you will work with your grants administrator to develop a grant agreement. Once the grant agreement is fully executed and in place, you'll be able to start expending funds. You'll be able to, not only does the grant agreement need to be fully executed, but you may need to be in compliance with any special provisions that have been defined by you and your grants administrator. And at that point, you'll be able to begin your planning phase. Any design, engineering, and permitting will be able to occur at that point in time. And you will be able to submit reimbursement requests for recouping those costs. After that, the state will want to review your site control documents, any final site plans, any updates to your timeline and budget, and we'll want to review and approve that. And once that happens, we'll give you the go-ahead. We'll want to see your acknowledgement signage at the project site. You'll then start your construction or site preparation or fabrication, actually work the project, incur any construction costs, and then you'll be able to start submitting reimbursements for any eligible expenditures. We'll want to see electronic quarterly reports. We'll conduct, at the state's discretion, we'll be conducting periodic progress visits. We'll want to be part of your ribbon cutting. And then finally, final documentation. We'll want any deed restrictions filed, any notices of completion filed as well, and then final documentation. And the state will make a final project inspection, and then once we approve all the final documentation, at that point we'll release your retention funds. And as Lori mentioned, the grantee will need to maintain and operate the project for a total of 15 years. And so that was development projects. What about the case of acquisition projects? So once again, you'll be assigned a grants administrator to execute the grant agreement. In the case of an acquisition, you'll actually need to submit an appraisal to the Department of General Services, and the Department of General Services will weigh in and make sure that the property was actually valued correctly and the property does not exceed any fair market value costs. The a payment request will need to then be submitted to advance funds into escrow, and then also to be reimbursed for any eligible expenditures such as the DGS review costs, or if you have any staff and consultant costs, we do cap those at $10,000. Once again, we'll want to see bond acknowledgement signage installed at the project site, and we want to be a part of your ribbon cutting. And then you'll submit your final documentation, any closing statements, deed restrictions, title insurance, or final documentation. And at that point, we'll release your retention funds. And in the cases of acquisitions, the grantee or successor will need to hold the property in perpetuity, as differentiated from the 15-year period for development projects. For reimbursements, for actual reimbursement payment requests, all payments need to be made on a reimbursement basis, with the exception of advancing funds into escrow for any acquisitions. Because of this, the grantee will need to have sufficient cash flow. Only expenditures within the project performance period are eligible to be reimbursed. The cost must have been specified in the initial budget that would have been worked out with your grants administrator, or in certain cases, maybe you did an amendment, but all costs need to be drawn out of that budget. You'll submit appropriate documentation to substantiate costs listed in any payment requests. We'll need to see proof of payment, such as receipts, zeroed out invoices, letters from vendors, or canceled checks. And with each payment request, we'll be requiring a certification that says that you expended the appropriate match amount. And as you do each reimbursement request, we'll be withholding a 10% retention amount, which is the amount that I mentioned will be released at the very end of the process. And for reimbursable costs, some examples of allowable costs. What do we pay for? We pay for services including design, surveys, technical support, material, supplies, and equipment, contractors, consultants, and equipment. Contractors, consultants, vendors, and subcontractors, and then personnel salaries, wages, and fringe benefits, as long as they're documented with timesheets or other equivalent substantiation. I don't know if I just made up a word, but disallowed costs, what we don't pay for publications, we don't pay for fundraising, we don't do overhead, no general operating support, no indirect costs. We don't do hospitality or entertainment. We don't do day-to-day maintenance. We don't do concessions, no fines, no penalties. We don't do unapproved contract cost overruns, and we don't do pre-award costs. And here's some contact information. You can actually email us with any questions or concerns regarding the museum grant program at mgpcoordinator@resources.ca.gov. You can also send us postal mail, 1416 9th Street, Suite 1311, Sacramento, California, 95814, or call us at 916-653-2812 with any questions or concerns regarding the museum grant program. Thank you.
So now we are happy to answer any questions that you have, or to hear your comments about the guidelines as they are currently proposed. And folks at home have the opportunity as well to email in. Are there any questions?
Good afternoon. I'm Roberta Long from the Folsom Historical Society. I want to thank the legislature and the administration and you all for this program, greatly needed. I have a question about the development side. I noticed in the guidelines that one of the requirements is that the property be owned by a willing seller. And I was wondering if that particularly refers to eminent domain, or if there's anything else.
Right. We will not fund, the state of California is unable to fund a project that is involved in eminent domain. So we actually want you to show us that you have spoken with your seller and that they are willing to enter into a negotiation with you. Additionally, the state requires that they pay no more than fair market value. and you can't add to that. So we are looking for that to be the case, and that's why we put that in there. Hi.
Couple questions. Do we fare better if we do not have any in-kind as match, or if match is more than 1-to-1?
I'm not sure how the match would be more than 1-to-1, but I'm sure that the,
We contribute, let's say the project is 100,000.
oh,
we put
that
in
you're expending
300,000.
significantly more.
Yeah.
I certainly think that that will be impressive. So if that's how you would like to structure it, that would be great.
Well, did I say penalized? That if we don't have in-kind, that if we, it's kind of the same
It's
question.
not expected for anybody to have in kind. It's really what makes sense for your organization, what makes sense for the project, what makes sense in terms of the fundraising that you've done or plan to do. So there's no penalty one way or another, but that's a very strong commitment to the project. You would be
Yeah, I
demonstrating
know there
that.
wouldn't be any penalty. I just wondered if there's bonus points, or it's looked at more favorably if we don't have any in-kind and we have a higher than a 1-to-1, that we're putting in more money than we're asking for.
I think it really is dependent on the circumstance of the organization, because we wouldn't want to penalize organizations that come with only an in-kind match. So we wouldn't give a benefit to an organization, but we would be impressed.
Okay, good enough. You mentioned yeah. Okay. Okay. You mentioned
Sorry.
storage, and you said, if you have storage and you need more, you could attach it to your current storage. What if we didn't have storage and we wanted to put in a storage building?
Yes,
That qualifies and is okay?
yes.
All right. On page 17, part 4, it says that, I don't know, I didn't bring it up here, but the project should have public support, and I figured that meant, in our case, a city contributing.
And you're with,
What?
and you are with,
Reading, Turtle Bay Exploration Park.
okay, public support. Your
And-
community support, your local government support, broadly, community in a broad sense.
We're probably not unique, but the city did support us. And then in 2008, well, actually a little later, 2009, they said we can no longer afford it. And do we get hurt if the city isn't contributing to our operations?
No, not at all. When we say support, we mean support in a variety of ways, and we don't necessarily mean supporting you
Okay.
at all. Because again, for
Citizens, fundraising efforts,
right,
things like that.
right, and obviously the fact that they did support you, and as you got up and running, that would be an example that they do support your organization. Now, I think what we would want to know is how are you replacing that? What's your current structure for
Okay,
for your funding stability?
great. Thank you.
And you do always want to be prepared to answer that question, though. Don't be offended by the question, because when the team goes out there, they may ask the very question, why isn't the city contributing? And you would just want to explain that this is the circumstances, and then Lori's absolutely correct. There's no penalty there.
Got it. Thank you.
Charlie Weiss of the Sacramento Zoo. I just wanted a little clarification. Section 5, it asks about the project team. Has the applicant clearly identified key members of the team performing each task? I'm wondering, are you referring to architects, planners, that sort of thing? And if so, how far along should the project be? Because Stu mentioned that once the grant is rewarded, then you can go into planning, design, engineering, permits, all of that stuff. So at what point should the project be?
We
so that-
don't expect you to list your vendors or your contractors or anything of that sort.
Okay.
What we're looking for in that part of the application is that we want to know that you have your ducks in a row. We want to know that you need an architect, or you need to do a survey, or we want to know that the city needs to approve, or give you a permit for a drive, whatever it is that needs to be done. We want to see that reflected there, and then likewise reflected in your budget. So we're not expecting you to have done any aspect of the project because, as you say, you would want to make them eligible costs and get reimbursed for them.
Okay, great.
It does need to be a little bit more than a thought in the head.
All right.
Okay? Because we're going to ask to see some of your preliminary type things. Some of the best site plans that we get are with crayons and Sharpies. So we do want it to be that point. What we're looking for is, if you say, what is a permit, then we think we might have a problem with capacity, with organizational capacity. We want you to at least have done some due diligence to know what it is that's going to be required to get you there.
And in order to put an accurate budget together, you will have to have thought the project out from beginning to end. So this is just a way to reflect that.
Okay. Great.
Exactly.
Hi, I'm from the Oakland Museum of California, and I'm just wondering, having gone through the process before, sorry about that, do we need to show proof of a three-bid process for any of our contractors who are already working on the project?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer that. You will need documentation in your files for whatever your approved process is. We're not going to ask for that documentation to be part of our grant file. It just would make our files thick and put us in the process of micromanaging your process. But we do ask that all of your documentation be available for an audit so that it's there for them when they come to see you. And the process would be whatever your approved process is. And yes, we won't tell you how to do that, but we will make you sign, prick your finger and sign that you've done it appropriately and that you've got the documentation to show that you've done that.
That's great, thank you very much.
You're welcome. These are good questions. They're different. We've just came off of our urban greening program. We did several rounds for that. And so it's nice to get some fresh questions. She's coming back. She's coming back.
Another one. I'm sorry that I missed the first part, but I'm wondering if you addressed the two separate deadlines already, because from the description, it seems as if there's a September deadline and then there may be a separate second.
The timeline is just that we're in a public comment period now, so this will close, we expect, and final guidelines will be approved in May. So they'll likely be released in June,
Okay.
with the deadline of applications being due in September. So other than that,
That's it.
okay.
Is that right? So,
Yes.
okay, then I was just confused.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we anticipate going before the board May 26th right now. I think that's the date that we're looking at for a board meeting. And then the guidelines will be released and we'll have a 90-day solicitation. So the date is a little bit fluid, but 90 days from the date we release.
Yes.
I said it was nice to get fresh questions. Let's.
How and who will determine who the evaluators are, and how many will there be?
We expect that there would be 8 to 10 evaluators, and it will be selected by staff. As it said in the guidelines, we expect that they'll come from the field and have deep knowledge of the museum industry in all disciplines. So from, living collections as well as, and also understanding capital campaigns. So we're going to be looking for a wide variety of expertise for that.
I'm sure the answer is no, but will any of them have applications?
We're actually working now to figure out how to to not lose the expertise of people in the field, but to still deal with conflicts of interest. So that is a consideration. I mean, we're considering it.
My public comment would be that there wouldn't be a conflict there, even though they wouldn't vote on their own.
Right.
I think that would be.
Your recommendation is that there not be any applicants on the panel.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Celeste?
Good afternoon. My name is Celeste Walden. I'm Executive Director of the California Association of Museums. And I just wanted to say thank you to the CCHE staff for putting together these wonderful guidelines and for conducting these hearings. I'm very excited to see some museum professionals in the room providing comment, and I hope there are more that are online doing so as well. And I look forward to the LA public hearing as well. Two things. One, I wanted to I think that one of the previous questions was about how many grant cycles there will be. And I think under phase 1 on page 4 of the guidelines, it says that there are 2 cycles. And so I just wanted to clarify if that was still the thinking.
You think that that's what she was asking?
Yeah,
huh?
exactly.
Okay. Yes, so this is the first cycle in phase 1. There will be another round after this. And we did talk about at the beginning that we have approximately $2 million per round. So this cycle that you have the schedule for is just for phase 1, round 1. Okay, yes, and there will be another set of distributions and solicitations.
And we look for awards from this first round, May 2016 is what we're looking at. And then at the same time, we would release for round 2, take our lessons learned, and then go for round 2. And then by then, Snoopy,
You stole my thunder.
go for it, sell
My
Snoopy.
second comment was I want to make sure that everybody in the room and online recognizes that there are 2 cycles of this grant program currently funded, but we do not yet have solidified the funding for the phase 2, which would be future funding for this project or for a museum grant program. And that is believed to be funding from the Snoopy license plate. And that will be established when we reach 7,500 plates, and we are currently at about 5,200. So thank you very much. We appreciate, very soon, CAM will be reaching out to all museums to ask for their assistance and to help us create a kind of a sweeter package for purchasers of the Snoopy license plate, and we look forward to sharing those details with you soon. Thank you.
Oh, I'm excited. You missed my little good grief comment earlier. It was all I could come up with. You know? I'm not in marketing, but anyway, that's good information. We're excited. We count daily, and sometimes it's more exciting. It's been a nice uptick, so it's great.
Could you go into a little bit more detail as far as the environmental reviews? Do they have to be completed with the application?
That's what we're proposing. We have programs that do it both ways, and typically with a program where you're going to have more than one cycle, folks can generally come in with their CEQA done.
Well, we'd love to hear more from you as well. If you have other suggestions, comments, or questions even after the workshop today, you have our email, and we want you to take a look more closely at the guidelines and give us some comments. Did you have something you wanted to add? Okay.
I don't know if they're appropriate now, like where to start. Do you have workshops to help people that haven't done this?
Sure. Why don't you come up to the microphone, because I'm sure there are some other folks who are in the audience who are going to be watching this who are also new to the process.
Okay, I'm a recently retired teacher, so they asked me to go ahead
And you're with?
the California History Foundation.
Okay, right.
And it's for Coloma. They're trying to rebuild the city as it was in the Gold Rush days. And, but since this is my first time writing for something like this, what help is there available to those of us? And, you know, how would you suggest we get started with it?
Well, the help is available as Polly said, there'll be 4 workshops or 6 workshops. So make sure you come to the workshops. They'll go into a lot of detail about how to prepare your application package and what's needed. And in addition to that, the staff is available by email or on the telephone as you plan your project. What project is it that you're going to be proposing to be sure that it's an eligible project and fits within this program?
Yeah, this is a this is a good time to mention that feel free, please send us a one-pager. Tell us what you're thinking about doing, you know, a concept, if you will. We are happy to look those over and give you input. We want to do that for you before you go through the entire application process. Our workshops are very interactive. Very interactive. We spend as much time meeting with folks one-on-one, sitting around the table, as we do sharing the information. And we will have, I hope, that we will have committee members there with us that are going to also give you some tips as to how to make your application more or as competitive. We like to say that we're your advocates. We work with everybody to make their application as competitive as it can be, and we get some strong feedback with that, and so we will take you and handhold you. Now, there's a caveat to that. We're going to help you as much as we can until that application is submitted. Once the application is submitted, then it becomes part of the competitive process, and we can no longer provide that kind of feedback. But the workshops are a good forum for that. We have, you're almost always going to get a live body that answers the phone, and you're going to get, any one of them are going to be able to help you through the process.
Do you have dates yet for the workshop?
We have tentative dates for the workshop. Do you know this?
Yes. Yeah, so the workshops are tentatively late June, early July. We're as we speak, we're working out the logistics for
Yeah.
the locations.
We're going to have one in Sacramento, Los Angeles, where's that? East Bay, and then San Diego. San Diego will be where the 4 will be, and we've, Celeste has been gracious enough to help us with some contacts, so we do plan on having them at actual museums, which will be fun. Yeah, and we'll release those dates. We're going to take a couple of weeks when we close the public comment period, which is April the 15th, and we'll need a week or so to get the public comments into it, and then we go before the board. We'll immediately release the dates at that time.
The information by calling the numbers on the front of the.
Are you on the email list? This museum program has an email list, and there's a link to it on the back of your guidelines. Have you been on the website? Okay, so there's a website where you can click on it and download the actual application package, so you can start to see what you need to gather and pull together.
Somebody send that to me.
Okay,
Great.
so you want to visit that website on a regular basis, and then go to that website now and click on the link and put yourself on the e-list, and that way you'll be notified as everything happens.
But if you don't get something by the time that you think you should, May 26th or June 1st, around there, please go ahead and call us. You know, I always get a little bit nervous when we rely 100% on technology, but that's me. But please call us, because we don't want you to miss something because you didn't get something in an email. It might have gone to junk. You know, you just never know.
Don't miss the workshops. Page 2 of the guidelines, not on the back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The workshops are extremely helpful, and yeah, I would encourage you to make sure that you're there. Thanks, Linda. They're free. And you get to see our faces again. I will tell you that Lori's getting us ready to launch, and she's going to get us through the next board meeting, and then she's going to join a hiking club and hike a couple of times a week, and she's going to go off into retirement, and we're thrilled for her, and we're just so happy that she agreed to get us through to the release of the guidelines, so.
And then I'll just be a museum visitor.
We'll have to be careful. She'll be checking on Craig and I to see how we're doing. Anything else?
Okay, I guess we can conclude. And you know where to find us if you do think of something. And we really appreciate your comments and your feedback as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.